It's my great honor and pleasure to introduce our first keynote speaker today, Trathen Heckman, who is a personal hero of mine. Building community resilience from the ground up is among the most urgent and important endeavors to navigate the great unraveling. In this time, we're all called upon to be leaders, and leadership arises in community. That's exactly what the Daily Acts organization and its impassioned founder and director, Trathen Heckman, have been doing in California's Sonoma County for over 20 years. Their work is an exemplary model that needs to spread widely. Like the redwood tree, whose tiny seed produces a towering tree, Daily Acts is about how the power of small can grow into something really big. They started by ripping out water-sucking lawns and planting food forests, yard by yard, block by block, neighborhood by neighborhood. Over time, Daily Acts began providing local communities with hands-on skill-building workshops, sustainability education, and tight social networks of connection and collective action. It led to formidable community mobilization that has now affected and created policies and new governance structures, including the dedication of public lands to carbon drawdown with a special focus on equity and the well-being of the most vulnerable. Trathen also serves on boards and advisory boards, including our very good friends at Transition US and the Norcal Resilience Network. Please join me in welcoming this force of nature, my friend, Trathen Heckman.
Good morning, Bioneers. It is such a blessing to be here with you today. You know, this is the first time in probably 20 years that I haven't been sitting out there in those funky blue seats with y'all. It's so easy to get overtaken by the power of big these days, with so much that's just soul crushing in this time, that we could actually lose sight of the only power we have, and that's the power of our small daily actions. But can small really make a big enough difference in this time? And so about 25 years ago, as I was waking up to just the painful state of our people and our planet, I also started to come across these people who felt the hurt, but they're somehow more alive and just tapped into a deeper source. And they're regenerating farms and forests and gardens. And then I came to my first Bioneers, and I just got my heart and my mind and my paradigm cracked open by being with thousands of y'all world changers. But it was tragedy that actually got me to turn these references to reality when I suddenly lost my mother right after 9/11. And so out of having these good references and these painful experiences, I was inspired to start Daily Acts around this idea that we could change the world in a garden, and by reclaiming the power of our daily actions. It was saying, yes, there's much hurt in our lives and our world, but there are bright spots all around us, and what we nourish grows. So we start out with these sustainability tours and just exposing people to the smell and the touch and the taste and the voice and the face of this better world being born. And this led us to do skill building workshops like with Greywater, where we installed the first permitted household Greywater system in our community, and then did 5 in a day and 13 in 2 cities on the way to helping influence the California state Greywater policy. So next, we partnered with the city of Petaluma to plant a garden. And at that time, water conservation best practice for municipalities was you rip out the soil and about 1,000 years of topsoil with it, and you take it to the landfill where it becomes more greenhouse gases emissions. Instead of doing that, we said, why don't we plant a food forest? And the city was like, what's a food forest? So I started to explain how it was this edible ecosystem that saved water, but it also harvested the rain and built soil and sequestered carbon and grew food and did a bunch of other beneficial things. But at that time, the head of the department was pretty dubious because he was mainly focused on saving water. And then, but we did get the go-ahead, and he rolls out to the project, and he's got his kid in his arm, and he just has this kind of funny look on his face. And he's probably thinking it's 80 degrees out. These people are muddy and sweating and laughing and having a really good time while saving the city a bunch of water and a bunch of money and doing a bunch of other good things. So this quickly led to the opportunity to plant another public food forest in another city and to start working on these civic incentive programs to spread these landscapes through the communities. Within a couple months, 350.org had its first day of global climate action. And so Daily Acts and a couple partners helped mobilize hundreds of volunteers. And we literally transformed the City Hall landscape in a day, moving mountains of mulch and saving 1 million gallons of water, $60,000 in installation costs, community garden beds, Chilean guavas, kiwis, some bioswales. And we're all amazed by the power of this. But the problems keep on biggering and biggering. So we're like, what if we didn't just plant one garden a day? What if we planted 350 gardens in a day? And we use this as a chance to call attention to the climate crisis and community solutions to these really complicated, interconnected issues. And honestly, we were afraid to even mention the goal was so big when we started out. And our city and agency partners were like, they were supportive of us, but I think they were pretty doubtful that we could achieve it. But the community rose to the challenge, and dozens of agencies and organizations and businesses came together. And together in a single day, we planted and revitalized 628 gardens. And this was astonishing on a number of fronts. First, because it got the water department thinking about food and community engagement, and it got the health department thinking about climate and water and the local economy. And all of us were thinking about the power of small when taken to scale. And so just for context, about this time, we're about a decade into Daily Acts, and we're still mostly volunteer powered with 2 to 3 staff. And this is because of the power of community. And when small groups think and act like a garden and act as an ecosystem catalyst to engage a wide range of stakeholders towards a bigger goal. And so from here, we kept on doubling the goals of the challenge, and we started handing it out with other communities, and other grassroots groups started using it. And within 9 years, we had registered nearly 100,000 actions and projects, and we're just astonished by the way the community stepped up in so many ways. It also enabled groups like Sustainable Contra Costa to launch the sustainability movement in their community. And so just to give you an example of one of these near 100,000 actions and projects, Jim and Nancy Haig got inspired to plant a garden as a part of the challenge because they heard one of our volunteers talking about how since she did this, she met more neighbors in a year than in 2 decades of living in her house. And so they partnered with Bioneers, community member Weaving Earth, and they transformed their landscape. And Nancy's super excited, and she's showing me these pictures. And there's these teenage girls sitting on their community bench in front of their garden, and they're reaching back, and they're grabbing some strawberries and getting a book from the free library, all the while cars are stopping in the street. And they saved many tens of thousands of gallons of water. But what was really astonishing was when Nancy says to me, and we're standing in a garden when she says it for supporting our supporters, and she says, we met more neighbors in 3 months than in 3 decades of living in this house. We could heal our disconnection and rapidly regenerate nature and community through the power of small together. And so the next year was the height of the California drought, and we saved more water in a few months through innovative collaborations than in years of running programs. We helped train and lead a group of youth who transformed 30 lawns in 30 days. And then we partnered with a commercial real estate firm on this enormous landscape transformation that saved a ton of water and money. And we had live music, and we had massage therapists, so we could show that you could affect epic change while laughing and having fun and jiggling the booty a little too. And so from here, the problems keep on getting bigger and bigger and bigger, as we all know. And so Daily Acts keeps on evolving our efforts from education to collaborative action to mobilizations to then tapping into nature's most common pattern that Bioneers knows so well, nurturing community through networks. And so we started getting engaged in coalitions and utilizing another systems change strategy of working at a range of scales. We were working from local to international with grassroots groups. And this led us to bringing the Leadership Institute into Daily Acts, which is another small local nonprofit, and they're having a hard time. And so we couldn't lose leadership in our community. And we also needed to steward the 500-person Fellows Network. We didn't want to lose that. We also launched an environmental health network to support our vulnerable populations. And so just when it feels like our plate's pretty full and we're kind of doing as much as we can, my wife and I are asleep in the middle of the night. We hear this loud knock on the door. We wake up and we turn on the light and looking at the back door, and we see our good friends Hannah and Chris, and they're standing there with their cats in their arms. And so we open the door and we find out that they made it out of their house just before the flames came. And then when we woke up the next morning, we were just gutted by the historic, rapid devastation that ripped through our communities as the North Bay fires had started. And so things were really chaotic and confusing. And we jumped into action and we immediately started convening and connecting with dozens of organizations and businesses and agency partners. And within a couple weeks, we'd helped launch 3 new initiatives. The first one to protect our watersheds, and another one to help bring community voice and equity to the center of the recovery conversation, and a third one to flip the script on who has and distributes power and resources by launching a grassroots fund with a half a dozen partner organizations that raised and distributed over $300,000 to undocumented workers, family farms, and grassroots organizations. And, so we moved from that to, it felt like in the time, our communities are so disconnected and government often is very siloed and not prepared for such devastation. So we're kind of like a switchboard operator, connecting between community members and agencies and departments. And this eventually gave way to being back in the garden, where as a part of a collaboration, we created community-informed, scalable landscape templates that were used by over 40% of fire survivors who submitted plans. And then on the 1-year anniversary of the North Bay fires, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change drops its most alarming report yet. This, as this global youth climate movement rapidly emerges and truly shows the power of small. Locally, Daily Acts helped launch Climate Action Petaluma to work with our city and our community to build the will to prioritize equitable climate action. And we did this by working with the city to become the first one in our county to declare it a climate emergency. And then this rapidly spread through most of the other cities in the county. And within 6 months, we had worked with our city to help create the first county climate action and policy commission at the city scale. And it was the first time we had a public interview process for a commission. There were a record number of applicants. And importantly, when the dust settled, it was led by a third women of color, including our vice chair, friend, ally, and Black First Nations climate justice organizer, Kylea Frederick. And so it's so important that we come together in these powerful ways. And it just felt like, oh my God, are we finally reaching a tipping point in the climate crisis and actually feeling a little hope and a joy? And then 2020 hits, and COVID, and the brutal taking of more Black lives, and more record devastation and fires and political division. But in dark times, community rises to the moment again and again and again. So we came together, Daily Acts and our partners, and we handed out 1,000 culturally relevant, apartment-friendly food garden kits to our Latinx community members. And Daily Acts and dozens of volunteers worked with our Climate Action Commission in Petaluma and created a bold draft climate emergency framework. And so this still has to go through our city council, but we have a few climate champions on council, including our vice mayor, who's a former Daily Acts staff and who has been through our Leadership Institute, and she's been through our permaculture design course. And as of last month, we have 2 new climate champions on city council, including a member of Climate Action Petaluma. And so I think we all know it's about really understanding the needs of this moment and the urgency of climate truth, and understanding the needs of all of our community members, especially those in the front lines, but also understanding the needs of our elected officials and our agency staff, because we have phenomenal people in every part of every system, and we just have to get better at pulling our levers together to really affect bigger change. Because like you all know, this is literally the biggest decade that humanity has faced. And so we come together to nourish, to connect, and to up-level, to turn these inspired Bioneers moments into stronger, better connected movements and organizations. Early next year, Daily Acts is launching a funding campaign to finish the book we're writing on these solutions so we could get them in more hearts and hands as quickly as possible, and to also expand our Leadership Institute to partner with groups like Bioneers to support and train more leaders, organizations, and communities. Because the vast majority of nonprofits are small and local, and we need to help them be as transformative as possible, to partner widely and to really push for bolder climate action and policy. But it's more than that. We need a fundamental shift towards shared power, a seat at the table for community voice to inform and implement these policies, and to really see and value the power of small in a new way, to unleash the power of community. Many of you probably work for, volunteer with, or donate to local small nonprofits. And it's vital to know that they have a really big role in the transformation that's required, because large social change happens through collaborative action, and small nonprofits are essential for this. And so I have two calls to action for you all. It's to take this Bioneers moment and up-level into your potential and spread this infectious inspiration with others. And if you're inspired to do so, you could join us and help spread and support big transformations through small solutions by going to DailyX's website and staying in contact with us. In a dark and stormy world, we need good companions and a good compass. So these are the incredible daily actors I feel blessed to get to work with every day. As you'll notice, mostly amazing women. And these are some of the many organizations and coalitions that make everything we do possible. As for our compass, it starts with our heart, because this is how we find the bright beacons to guide us. It's reclaiming the only power we have, that of our daily actions. And it's nurturing community, because these are nature's operating instructions. And when we do these things consistently, we could build the resilience to stay awake and engaged in the great work of remaking our lives and world through an infinite procession of itsy-bitsy small actions and efforts. Because the power of small is much bigger than you think. But we have to believe, and we have to invest, and we have to keep leaning in. DailyX exists in no small way, in part to the incredible influence of this community of change makers. So last thing I want to say is thank you all so much, Bioneers, for inspiring us to continue to step into the moment. Take heart, take part, and take action.